I'd like to welcome you to Holy Saturday at Bonnevaux. I'm on my own today because this is our desert day. I'm speaking from my room here. And a desert day at Bonnevaux is a day where the community takes a day of extra silence. We meditate during the day, morning, midday, and evening, but we meditate without readings or chant or words. And we're free to change the routine a little as we wish, the rhythm. We can go for a walk, or we stay in our rooms, or whatever. And tonight, of course, we'll gather for the Easter Vigil, beginning down by the Easter tree, which I can see at the end of the valley there outside my window. We will light the holy fire, the Easter fire, and the paschal candle, and we'll walk up from there, about 10 of us in the community resident here, and up to the barn where we've now moved to meditate every day. And we'll continue with the rest of the vigil and the Mass there. I'd like to reflect on the meaning of Holy Saturday and the Easter Vigil, and the meaning of Easter, in fact, in the light of a beautiful text that I've come to love over the years. It occurs in the monastic breviary on Holy Saturday. It's a homily given in the 2nd century, perhaps by Melito of Sardis. And this is the first paragraph. Something strange is happening. There is a great silence on earth today, a great silence and stillness. The whole earth keeps silence because the King is asleep. The earth trembled and is still because God has fallen asleep in the flesh, and he has raised up all who have slept ever since the world began. God has died in the flesh, and hell trembles with fear. It's a beautiful text, which I hope I will be able to convey to you and use to speak about the meaning of Holy Week. It speaks about Christ, as we've just heard in that first paragraph. But at one point, it becomes Christ, speaking to us, the readers, the listeners, and claiming that he and we, the reader, the listener, are one undivided person. So this is a silent day, as the author of that homily says, or silent except for the frogs. I think you may have heard the frogs the other day down on the lake. They started about 6:30 in the morning and keep going until after dark for about 2 weeks. Great sign of spring energy, very suitable for the Easter mistress, new life rising. But apart from the frogs, it's a very silent day. Silence because Jesus is in the tomb, and the tomb is a silent place. The silence of death is absolute, non-negotiable. However much we weep, as many people are these days, over dying or dead relatives or friends or beloved ones, however much we may cry to them in the days after their death, they are silent. But the author says something strange is happening, something mysterious is happening in the silence of the tomb. The tomb is becoming a womb where a new form of life is being formed. The old language of words and thoughts with which we communicated to those who have died is no longer there. It's a one-way language, has to be exchanged. And this is a new language of humanity that we are welcoming, the silence of the resurrection. But word about about language. Language doesn't only communicate meaning in words or encode what we want to say. It actually shapes the very thing we are trying to express. So in some ways, language allows us to express and communicate. In another way, it traps us. We're limited by the tool of language. We're born into language and we are stuck with it. It doesn't only describe or capture meaning, it shapes the meaning of the human experience. We learn language from others. We listen, we try to mouth it. Eventually we develop some proficiency in speaking it, writing it. And we find ourselves, we discover ourselves as we learn to converse, to interact, to exchange words with others. But language isn't only words. Of course, language can be ritual, as we will be doing tonight. It's the tone of voice that you use. It's the metaphors we use, the images that come to mind when we use language. And it's, of course, also the way in which we physically, non-verbally express what we want to say. And there's no boundary in this sense between body and mind. The word becomes flesh if we are speaking from the heart. If we are trying to communicate with everything we have and are, the word becomes flesh. The body dies, of course, and language, as we know it, also dies. This is the silence of the tomb. Most of us struggle with learning a new language. I've been learning French since I was about 12, and I'm still struggling with it. Some people are very good at languages. Children, of course, can grow up maybe speaking 2 or 3 languages. But even the best of us who are bilingual have a mother tongue, and we only have one mother. But also, we are each of us a unique language. Each one of us is a language. Every person. We share vocabulary, we share grammar, we share culture, ideas, we look alike. But each of us is a one-off, unique language. I think there are about 6,000 or 7,000 languages in the world today. The biggest is Mandarin Chinese. 2,000 of these languages have less than 1,000 speakers. So a very small little linguistic group can understand each other in that language. And they say that one language dies every 14 days, never to be spoken or understood again. So today, under the pressure of uniformity, of English, of the internet, the 6th mass extinction of species that we're living through, we're also seeing many languages dying out. And the loss of every language, or the incapacity to speak language, to be unable to read or to write or to speak properly, is a huge impediment to our human development and to our human relationships, to be able to express ourselves, to be able to know that we are understood. So language is precious. Language is necessary. And yet language dies. Language is not the only thing there is. Death is real. We didn't need COVID-19 to teach us that. But this virus is reminding us again about the meaning of mortality, about the unpredictability of the moment of our death. And maybe by remembering death, we will remember how we are supposed to live. And maybe through this crisis, we will be shocked into a reevaluation of how we are living and communicating today. So a deep silence on the face of the earth and in the eyes of faith as Jesus lies in the tomb. But in that tomb, a new language is being born. Some cultures speak of sexual orgasm as une petite mort, a little death. And there are many other examples of these little deaths when our ordinary consciousness is transcended or suspended, maybe an ecstasy of beauty or of love or of insight into the truth. And for a moment we are, as it were, taken out of language into a direct experience of reality. And we can think of meditation in this way as a little death, a friendly little death, one that we can build into daily life in a regular way. Many of you at home have perhaps been learning how to set your timetable, organize your day in the lockdown with times of meditation as the key pivotal points. So although meditation is a very ordinary thing, we can also see it as sharing in this great mystery of human consciousness and human development, a friendly little death that we build into daily life, but transformative, as all death is. Death is part of life. When John Main was dying, he wrote his last letter, published in Monastery Without Walls. And this is what he said in October, November 1982. The mystery surrounding Jesus was perceptible from the beginning of his life. Not until his death and resurrection, however, could it be fully known, because not until then was it complete. Our life does not come to full unity until it transcends itself and all limitations by passing through death. Silence is a kind of death, and this is perhaps why people are frightened of it. Why in our very noisy culture, our very overloaded communication culture, where even if you go into an ordinary restaurant, you'll hear music getting louder and louder. We're frightened of silence. We need to occupy every moment, every space, every corner, even in the elevator with noise. We seem to be frightened of silence, and maybe this is why meditation is challenging to us. Why people can be scared of it at first, why they need to start with small steps, meditate just for a few minutes. Children, interestingly enough, by and large, the vast majority of children love silence. I remember one child in a classroom commenting at the end of a meditation period with perfect innocence. He said, "I think this is the first time we've been so quiet in this room, and it was very nice." When people get a little older, the silence may be more threatening. And of course, they may be attracted to meditation, but frightened of the silence. So you put earphones on and you have a nice soft voice that speaks to you and calms the mind and tells you to let go of your thoughts and so on. And that may be useful as a preparation, but it's not the practice of meditation. Practice of meditation is taking that definitive step into silence by taking the attention off our thoughts. Doesn't mean we just turn off our thoughts, as you could turn off this talk now if you wanted. But it means that we let go of that stream of consciousness, of thoughts and words and imagination, that constant chatter, those constant conversations we're having with ourselves or with imaginary people in our minds. So the work of silence is laying aside those thoughts. We're not in silence yet, but we're doing the work of silence. And the silence grows little by little. So silence is a kind of death. And so is stillness. Remember what the author of this homily said: silence and stillness, a great silence on the earth and a great silence and stillness. Stillness is a kind of little death as well. Physically, the dead are very still. On Holy Saturday, we imitate the stillness of the death of Jesus in the tomb through the silence and the stillness of our desert day here in Bonnevaux, in many other ways. Where is he? Where has he gone? Where have the dead gone? This is one of the most difficult questions that the human mind listens to itself asking, and there is no immediate answer to that. This is the nature of mourning, of grieving, that we don't get an answer to those kind of natural questions. This is what he says. He is gone to search for our first parent as for a lost sheep, greatly desiring to visit those who live in darkness and in the shadow of death. He is gone to free from sorrow the captives of Adam and Eve, he who is both God and the son of Eve. The Lord approached them, bearing the cross, the weapon that had won him the victory. At the sight of him, Adam, the first man he had created, struck his breast with terror and cried out to everyone, "The Lord be with you." Christ answered him, "And with your spirit." He took him by the hand and raised him up, saying, "Awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will give you light." So, what does this mean? This description of what the Christian tradition and iconography calls the descent of Jesus into hell. Perhaps we can understand it psychologically today. Whatever lives in darkness and in the shadow of death, our oldest memories, our worst, maybe half-forgotten traumas, very often the worst shocks and traumas of our lives, which might have extended over many years in childhood, are half dead, but they're half alive. We've got on with life, we've moved on, but there's some powerful afterlife of those experiences and memories still holding us bound. And here Christ is described as going into those depths of human ancestral memory, penetrating deeper than we would like anyone to go into our own memories, and rescuing, waking up what has fallen asleep, and pulling the person, or that part of the person that is still locked in this paralysis of trauma, of guilt, of fear, of shame, pulling them out into life, into wakefulness. This is what is happening on Holy Saturday. It looks very still. It looks very silent. as meditation does. But behind the scenes, as it were, there is a very powerful work taking place, a very powerful healing and exorcism and liberation of the human spirit, a powerful force of love, of care, of attention, penetrating through those shadowy, smoky, dark, bad-smelling areas of our inner psyche. This is the work of Holy Saturday. The half-dead, the half-alive, as the ancient world understood Hades, they called hell. The ghostly world, the spectral world, creepy, scary. And we love to be scared by these images of half-life. We see the hidden world more and more visibly, I think, in our world, as it breaks through into social and political life. We can see some very scary leaders in the world and some very scary events taking place by human agency. Not even talking about the virus, but human, political, social agency. Some very strange and dark things happening. But we also have, as another reflection of that, the horror movie syndrome, the theme of the zombie, the night walkers of Game of Thrones, that series which I couldn't bear even to watch, The Walking Dead, survivors of a zombie apocalypse, I think. But we like to be scared. We like to be scared as long as we are frightened to face the real fear. It's a kind of half exorcism to play with those fears by watching them as a series on Netflix. But actually, the fears that they express are real in us. The fear of being half alive, still caught in the past, locked, bound by our own history. That's why Christ is described here as penetrating through all those strata of time, all those geological, psychological, biological, evolutionary levels to the very, very root of human consciousness. So Jesus descends into hell to make these half-alive memories and nightmares extinct by raising our consciousness, by making us fully alive, by waking us up, awakening us from within. It's not through the mind that we are woken up, but from the heart, and from those deepest places in our heart, in our inner consciousness. Often those places we have locked up and wanted to forget. It's there that the risen life of Christ touches us and wakes us up and calls us back to the fullness of life. So it's not from the mind, not from words or languages or language or ideas that this awakening, this revival, this resurrection takes place. The words, the ideas, the images, of course, may help. They point to what is the reality, but the reality itself is the direct action, the unmediated, silent action, where he becomes one with us at the very source of our own identity. So he goes to that originating point, that source of our being. Christ in you, the hope of the glory to come, as St. Paul describes it. And this is how he goes on. Now, Christ is speaking directly to us. I am your God, who for your sake have become your son. We're speaking to Adam here. Adam represents the whole of humanity. Out of love for you and for your descendants, that's us, I now, by my own authority, command all who are held in bondage to come forth, all who are in darkness to be enlightened, all who are sleeping to arise. I order you, O sleeper, to awake. Here's the authority of Christ, that authority we encountered many times in the Gospels, that Jesus was said to speak with an authority unlike that of the other religious leaders. A personal authority coming from the integrity of his own experience. I order you to awake. He has that authority to speak to humanity as a whole. How many leaders have that? I did not create you to be held a prisoner in hell. This is a waste of my investment for you to be half alive in this netherworld. Rise from the dead, for I am the life of the dead. The dead are not fully alive, but they are not fully dead, because he is the life even of what has died. Rise up, work of my hands. An artist loves the work that they've made. A parent loves the child they've made. Rise up, work of my hands. You who are created in my image. Rise, let us leave this place. And then now, this is the greatest line in this ancient homily. Rise, let us leave this place. Let's get out of this hellhole. For you are in me, and I am in you. Together, we form one undivided person. You in me, and I in you. And we cannot be separated. So here is the living and loving revelation of the meaning of Holy Week. It is the inseparability of Christ from each one of us, of each of the human languages that we are. And he has encountered and become one with us because in the deepest mystery of creation, we are in his image. He was the model on which we were made. For your sake, I, your God, became your son. I, the Lord, took the form of a slave. I, whose home is above the heavens, descended to the earth, and beneath the earth, beneath what you can see on the surface. For your sake, for the sake of humanity, I became a human being without help, free among the dead. For the sake of you, who left the garden, when you left the Garden of Eden, I was betrayed in a garden, and I was crucified in a garden. So here, as we often see in Christian literature, there is a gliding, a movement from the deepest expression of the mystery of Christ, the one in whom the Godhead dwells embodied, the Word made flesh, the Son of God, the incarnation, the deepest mystery of Christ, linked to his humanity and to the human language that he was and that he spoke in this life, in the Garden of Gethsemane, and in everything that we read in the Gospels. And there is a movement between the life of Jesus that we read about in the Gospels, but was written in the light of the faith of the resurrection, and the experience of the risen Christ in us, awakening us from within. So there is this continuous movement, and this is the power of the mystery of Scripture, that it feeds us for the journey deeper into this discovery of the risen Christ within us, by reminding us of the human language that Jesus is, was, and the death that he suffered. We are awakened to him as the eternal Word of God. So the resurrection is a revelation. It's not just some kind of another stage in a story, another click of the switch. The resurrection is a revelation of the whole meaning of everything that there is. It's a restoration of creation. It is often seen as a renewal of creation, because we are now able to see it, understand it, and participate it in a new way. Reality itself has been renewed, made more accessible and wonderful to us. Everything looks different in the light of the new life. Think of any time that you have died, when you've lost something or someone you've loved, or you've gone through a painful ordeal of some kind. You've lost your job, or you find yourself locked up in a confined space with people. These moments of profound letting go, of dying, can be followed, if we look back on our lives, quite unexpectedly. We hardly dared to hope for it to happen. It's beyond anything we could imagine that it could be renewed. And yet, not always, immediately, but this resurgence of life, this resurrection from the dead happens, and then we see things differently. This is what happens in springtime. So to remind us that this is not all in the head, he reminds us of his passion. He shows us his wounds. He reminds us of some of the physical memories that he accumulated during Holy Week. See on my face the spittle I received in order to restore to you the life I once breathed into you. So we have again this bridge between the eternal Word, who is the model on which creation is made, and upon each one of us is created, with the human historical life of Jesus. See there the marks of the blows I received in order to refashion your warped nature in my image. On my back, see the marks of the scourging I endured to remove the burden of sin that weighs upon your back. See my hands nailed firmly to a tree, for you, who once wickedly stretched out your hand to a tree in the Garden of Eden. So here we are taken again deeply into the mystery of Holy Week, the redemptive suffering of Jesus. This doesn't mean Jesus is paying a debt to God the Father for the sins that we committed, or the debt we ran up on our credit card. It means that he has entered into human suffering, human disfigurement, even as we can see, as we saw, even into that dark netherworld of the human psyche, out of which comes all manner of frightening and creepy things. He's entered into that through his own experience. The difference is that he went into that with eyes wide open, heart wide open, and filled, as he could only be, with the spirit of wisdom. I slept on the cross, and a sword pierced my side for you who slept in paradise and brought forth Eve from your side. My side has healed the pain in yours. Redemptive suffering. I mentioned the other day the beautiful vision of the Bodhisattva ideal written in the 8th century of how the suffering of one person can bring about the healing and relief of the suffering of others, so that we may commit ourselves, even in the midst of our own suffering, even in the midst of this pandemic, we can even now commit ourselves to sharing with others in whatever way is possible the fruits of our own spiritual journey, or whatever we get out of this. We dedicate that not to our own little spiritual deposit or term bonds or whatever they're called. We don't just accumulate these private funds for ourselves, but we give them away. This is what we are trying to do here in Bonnevaux in this time of global contraction and global fear, to share, as many other groups and centers are, but to share what we can find and do find in that simple transformative work of meditation. We can share the fruits of our spiritual practice with others, so that, as according to that Buddhist tradition, we can be the medicine, the physician, and the nurse to those who are suffering. So this is the redemptive nature of suffering as we can see it described in this beautiful passage, I think. So he reminds us of his passion, he shows us his wounds. This is not Gnostic at all. This is not some kind of abstraction, some kind of sophisticated, highly abstract philosophy. This is incarnational, affirming humanity. This physical reality is important. The sword pierced my side for you. My side has healed the pain in yours. There's a direct link at the physical, psychological level. But this is not regressive. We're not going back to something we've lost. If you've lost something, you've lost it. If you find it again, it's in a totally transformed way. You can't go back. Let's hope that we don't go back to repeating the mistakes, the sociological, social, economic, religious, organizational, business, commercial mistakes that we have been making for so long, and for which many of us felt that there had to be something to happen. Something would happen, because it was unsustainable. Let's hope that we understand, as we gain in wisdom during this difficult and painful time, where we take the opportunity to grow in wisdom, so that we can see that we do need to change, and there is a new life possible for us. This is what Holy Saturday and the Easter Vigil and Easter Sunday is about, that it is possible for us to be transformed. Not just a little bit, not tinkering with the interest rates, but a fundamental shift in the way we think and act and interact with each other. So there's no regression. We're not going back into the paradise we lost. Let us leave this place, Jesus says. So let's change direction, metanoia. Let's get out of this hellhole. Let us leave this place. The enemy led you out of earthly paradise. I will not restore you to that paradise, Jesus says, but I will enthrone you in heaven. Something better than what you left before, better than all the affluence and all the diseases that came with that affluence. Something greater, something more fully human and more fully divine. I forbade you the tree that was only a symbol of life, but see, I who am life itself am now one with you. The deep wisdom of this text, the heart of Christian wisdom, is our oneness with Christ. He is with us in our suffering. He is with us in our death, and he is with us in our resurrection. I am now one with you. I appointed cherubim to guard you as slaves are guarded, but now I make them worship you as God. This is the incredible hyperbole of Christian theology. God became human so that human beings might become God. That's how they said it. The bridal chamber is adorned, the banquet is ready, the eternal dwelling places are prepared, the treasure houses of all good things lie open. The kingdom of heaven has been prepared for you from all eternity. So no wonder we say Happy Easter, because if we can even begin to touch the meaning of Holy Week, we are filled, or we begin to be filled, or we experience a touch of that fullness of life that we are capable of, and that we can change, we can live differently. The resurrection sends us back to live this life in a new way. That's why I wanted to share that this text with you. I hope it's conveyed something of what it means to me. But of course, it's in a language that very few people speak today. And maybe many of you listening to this saying, well, all that religious language, what does that mean? Well, it shows us that we have to learn that language or have it explained to us. But there's something of the experience, I think, that comes through even when the language isn't very familiar. It seems outdated or too much of a dialect. But we need a new language, definitely, to communicate that experience, using the best of the old, what works, and letting what doesn't stay in the archives. This is a hard decision to make for religious people, how to change their language, their forms of worship. Well, during this epidemic, churches have been closed in many parts of the world. We're discovering that going to church isn't what it's all about. You may miss going to church if you are a regular churchgoer. But on the other hand, you may also be discovering there is a contemplative dimension to faith, a contemplative heart to religion. We need silence to still and purify our mind, to come to that stillness and silence which turns the tomb into a womb. We need that silence in order to come to clear judgment, to have the courage to be real, not to go back to old habits, to accept the death of what has died. It's over, it's finished. And whatever ways we've had in the past of transmitting our faith, and they don't work, if they've died, then thank you very much. We will have to try something different. And we will find that something different the more silent we become. We know that meditation creates community. And in that community, we are taught collectively. When something has died in our personal lives, we have to let it die. We have to let it go. Let the person who has died go in order for the full meaning and the full gift of what we once enjoyed to be reinvested in the new life that we are now living. That's the resurrection. It's easier for many of us to die on the cross or to hang on the cross than it is to roll back the stone from the tomb and to rise into new life, to come back to this life, living it in a new way. So the silence of the tomb becomes the silence of the womb with new life, not zombies, but risen human beings alive of the life of God, human and divine, one undivided person. Isn't this a good message for us to take with us, even into the next room, or onto the Zoom meetings we're having, or conversations we're having, and to take with us when we do go back out into the world? That's why we keep the vigil in the silent hours of the night tonight, so that we can be attuned, mind and body and heart, to recognize the new form of life that we are being led into by the risen Jesus. But hearing about this in words or ritual is only the first step. The real difference happens when we recognize him. He comes to us hidden, and salvation consists in our recognizing him, as Simone Weil said. So let's prepare for the new world, awaiting the human family, waiting as a whole for this new life after this pandemic, after this virus of fear and suffering that has manifested in this terrible disease, but has been lurking, waiting for a long time in our social body. So let us not be frightened by the resurrection. Let's allow the resurrection to lift us out of fear. He is not a ghost. He is our own true self. He and we form one undivided person. So we will be holding you in our prayer and in our hearts this evening at the Holy Saturday Vigil, and in the morning we'll be celebrating the Easter morning Mass at noon French time, and if you can join us for that, we'll be online for it. So for the rest of this day, and with the frogs still making a lot of noise in the lake outside, I wish you a very happy and holy Saturday.